Welcome to another edition of Grace Under Pressure, where our guest today is John Strelecky. And thank you, John, for that unbridled commercial. Product placement.
Sorry, John, you just happened to catch me. I'm reading a great book here. If you haven't, everybody who's watching, if you haven't read it yet, you totally should. It actually is a great book. I commend you on a job well done. It's a great topic and great writing.
Thank you. You're very kind. Grace Under Pressure, those who know the show, it's an interview show where I talk to thought leaders and doers like John Strelecky. Grace Under Pressure focuses on the soft stuff that we often ignore. And, generosity, compassion, respect for others. And now in tough times, leaders step to the fore. They act for the benefit of others, and they energize people as they pull them along to make sure that everyone is on board and getting good work done. So welcome, John Strelecky. It is a pleasure to have you, sir.
Thanks, John. Great to be here. Great to see you, as always.
Great. I want to tell folks a little bit about you because you are amazing. Anyway, John is, I'm an author and I'm proud to publish books and have them translated into other languages. But John is an author on sales and multiple editions. It's on steroids. Multiple books, 42 languages, mega million selling books internationally. You've won Bestseller of the Year awards 5 times, and your books have spent collectively 800 weeks. 800 weeks on bestseller lists. Amazing. Excuse me. John, your entry into writing became, as a result, sort of an accident. You changed careers. You were 33, and your first book was Cafe on the Edge of the World. It was a smash hit. Excuse me. And I believe, is that the book being turned into a major motion picture, John?
Yeah, that's the one. Yep.
That's cool. You've written other books, including, The Big Five for Life, which we'll focus on today. And when John isn't writing, he's traveling. Well, he used to travel prior to COVID, but he fishes and is an outdoors person and an all-around good person. Welcome, John.
Thank you. Thank you so much.
I apologize, folks. I have a frog in my throat, so I'm going to throw that first question to John and let him rock. We're in an upside-down world, John. So what are you hearing from people you talk to, clients and otherwise?
Yeah, it's definitely a strange time. We're facing something that the vast majority of people have never thought about, let alone faced with all that's going on with COVID. And, there's always a yin and yang to everything, though, John. So definitely this is challenging us in a lot of different ways. But it's also inspiring us to be creative and come up with unique solutions. I was doing another interview earlier today, and we were talking about playing online cards with relatives. And so I know that's not like a big leadership topic or something that a major company is focused on, but it's such an interesting example of, since you can't get together with your loved ones in person necessarily, how can you create special moments, what I call museum day moments? And it's funny because the interviewer was telling me about this, and I was like, we do the same thing. And I think that expands into so many aspects of our lives where we humans are very creative. And when we can't do the things that we want to do, the challenge is to use that creativity to find other ways to create the special moments that we want, whether it's doing something right for your folks who work with you, whether that is engaging with family members in a time when you can't interact with them in person or whatever. But I always do my best to look for the yin and yang of every situation.
Well, you do. And so you have a life experience that changed your life, and tell us about it. It was the revocation of your pilot's license. Nothing that you had done untoward, but something different happened. Tell us about it, John.
Yeah, so I wasn't really sure who I wanted to be, what I wanted to do when I was growing up. I was a good student, I was a good athlete, but I wasn't one of those people, and you meet some of them sometimes where they know from the time that they're 5 years old that this is who I want to be, right? A business icon, a doctor, or whatever.
That was my father, actually, and sadly he's passed on, but today is his birthday, so I'll give him a special shout out. So
Awesome. Yeah. So I think about 20% of the population tends to fall into that category. But then for the rest of us, it's a matter of figuring it out. Where do you want to lend your genius to the world? And that's a keyword that I use often because I do believe that everyone has genius to offer. And so for me, I didn't really know what I wanted to be. And I saw the movie Top Gun and I thought, I want to do that. And it really wasn't the military aspect as much as it was the competing and trying to be the best of the best and to push myself to greatness. And so I pursued a career in aviation. And that was going to be my path. Invested every penny I'd ever saved since the time I was 12 years old. I started working very young because we didn't come from a lot of means. And I had it all taken away from me, actually. There was something that was no fault of my own. I was diagnosed with a heart condition that only impacts 1 in every 100,000 people and only matters, as I was told, if you want to be a pilot or an astronaut. And so, I mean, what are the odds on that, right? But in retrospect, as I look back now, I realize that had that have been the path that I walked, I would not be doing the things that I do now. I would never have written any books. I probably would not have been as much the adventure traveler as I am now, because my dream was, if I'm an airline pilot, then I can get free airline tickets and every other week I can go someplace. But as you know from our sidebar discussions, I've backpacked around the world twice. I've explored countless places in the world that fulfill my need to be an adventurer. And so this thing actually turned out to be a great thing. Could have never known it at the time.
That's a good lesson, and we often hear that from successful people, that adversity has shaped their life. And I think it's a good lesson, especially for now, because none of us expected this, and our lives are completely turned upside down through no fault of our own. But we must, just as you said, we have to be creative and use our resilience. So, so this has given you a wider perspective on life, has it not, John?
Oh, absolutely. Yeah, absolutely. And I think that's the trick, is to constantly be asking ourselves, what can I learn from this experience? Things are not always going to go the way we want. And I'm not saying it's easy in those moments to be in a state of grace, to use your wonderful word. But if you can be in a state of grace and say, why is this happening to me? Why is this happening in general? Right. It opens up a place where you can, from a place of curiosity, discover something that's valuable. When it happened to me as a pilot, I wish I could say I was that graceful back then. For about a year, I was massively depressed and unhappy. But since then, I've learned to become better at this, where asking yourself that question opens up an interesting dialogue, which then leads to answers and other paths which you otherwise wouldn't have seen.
Right. And let me just toss this out to you. So from that moment of that you were wrestling with a year of uncertainty and unease, any lessons you drew from that you are relevant to people struggling with their own situation?
Yeah. So the first thing I would say is to ask that question from a place of curiosity. Why is this happening to me? And allow yourself to sit in that space for a little bit and see what comes out of it. I will tell you a personal example that came from that exact situation. And then there's another one that came from a writing project I was working on. So, I said, why is this happening? This totally isn't fair, right? And the path that I then took was to say, well, what am I going to do next with my life? Like, this was the plan. There was no plan B. There was no real backup.
And you had achieved it. You had achieved it.
So. I had achieved it. And then again, like I was working, 30 hours a week while I was going to school full time. I took 21 credit hours because that's all at my school. If you took over 15, every class was free, and I was poor. So I took 21 credit. So I had done everything that felt right, Yeah. And I thought, I'm a good guy. Like, this is totally unfair. So I had done all those things, and then that crashed and burned, to use another airline analogy. And I couldn't follow that path anymore. And so the question was, what is next? And so I didn't know what was next. I worked for a few years and then applied to the Kellogg Graduate School of Management, which is a very, very prestigious business school. But here's the story, John. I applied there because I was already working at Northwestern, and I didn't even know that business schools were ranked, any of that stuff, right? And so I took the GMAT, I scored super well, I submitted. Anyway, long story short, I got a rejection letter in the mail saying, we don't think you have enough practical work experience, but you can call us if you think we're wrong. So I called them up and I said, I think you're wrong. And they said, well, you can send us a letter. So I sent this letter, which was a very I'm frustrated with the world letter because of everything that I'd gone through, and explained about being a pilot, lives in your hands, all the rest of this. And lo and behold, I actually then received a letter back 6 months later saying, you are in for the program. And this was a gift back to me. I felt I had one taken away with the airline dream, but this was one given to me. Right. And maybe that's another thing I would say, is that there is parity. There is, if you keep moving, there is parity that comes about.
I would call that a moment of grace, if you will.
Totally right. And this is where it gets fascinating to me, whether you're leading a large corporation, whether you're an entrepreneur who's trying to develop your own organization, whether you're a parent working with your kid, can you allow yourself to step out of the emotions long enough and trust in the universe in a big enough way that as long as you are true to yourself and to your core alignment and your core authentic being, that good things will happen. And I will tell you, it's not an easy place to be at, but if you allow yourself to do it, when I allow myself to do it, great things happen.
Yeah, and it's sort of a tightrope act, is it not? And it's also a plunge into the unknown, a plunge into ambiguity. But I know one of the things your North Star is purpose.
Yeah.
So let's explain what PFE is.
Yeah, PFE stands for Purpose for Existing. It's a concept that I introduced in the first book that I wrote, the one you referenced, The Cafe on the Edge of the World. And it's the answer to the question, why am I here? Which is one of the key questions in that book that the character discovers on the back of a cafe menu. And it's every bit as applicable to us as individuals to ask that question, why am I here? Statistically, you get 28,900 days on the planet. The question is, what are we going to do with our days? And the answer to that is, well, I don't know. Why are you here? Because if you say, I want to be a worldwide traveler and adventurer, the decisions you're going to make, the choices you'll make will be different than if you say, I want to be an entrepreneur who builds small businesses in my hometown. Or I want to be a parent who is the best parent ever and to be there for my kids 24/7. So asking that question and answering it is critical. Now, interestingly, on the leadership and business side, it's every bit as relevant because every organization exists. Not that many organizations are very clear about why they exist. And if you want to get the best of the best talent, if you want to attract customers to your organization, having a very clear PFE that you not only live and breathe within the organization, but that you then make aware to the general public is by far one of the most effective tools.
Right. Purpose is something that I've written about and coached around. And I was in Amsterdam once for a keynote, and my wife and I went to the Rijksmuseum. And obviously, if anyone and you've been to the Netherlands probably countless times, they were still are seafaring people, but especially in the 16th, 17th century. So there are paintings of lots of boats or ships. And there was one of a ship that was becalmed at sea. And I thought to myself, that's what living without purpose is like. You're drifting. It may not be totally unpleasant, but you aren't going anywhere.
Yeah. Yeah. And to tweak on that a tiny bit, you can, because I've done this when I've been backpacking around the world, you can say, I'm an adventurer with no defined path, and you're willing to go with the flow of the day and see where it takes you, but you're still core to your purpose, which is I'm an adventurer. And you were talking about balancing acts. There can be that wonderful balancing act of alignment with purpose and yet flexibility in the way that it's going to manifest.
That's a very valid point, John. And we had discussions with this early on. But some of us in neglected to mention that you are a member of Marshall Goldsmith 100 Coaches, as am I. And we used to have the phone calls daily, literally phone calls, and we would talk about it. And some of our team or everyone in the group is, except for me, is highly accomplished. And so these are people with, who've led purposeful lives. But some people just, the pandemic, it was like, what pandemic? And I'm going forward, and others just needed to wait a minute. I need to get my bearings, and I think that's part of purpose too, is it not, John? So
very much so. Everybody is going to react differently to different stimuli and changes and the rest of that. And probably the best thing we can do is to allow ourselves to be authentic in the way that we're feeling in a given moment. The belief that we're supposed to be perpetually up and happy and motivating and never down, it's just completely unrealistic. And I'm not sure we learn very much doing that either. I find for myself, if I'm having a down day, if I'm willing to ask that question, like, well, maybe it was something I ate that day. Like maybe the chemical reaction of the food isn't a good fit for my body type. Maybe it's the way that I spend my morning. Did I do my morning workout routine? Did I stretch? So I think it's okay to dive deep and feel those things and ask ourselves why we feel that way. I'm not sure life is ever a perpetual up, but I have found, and I talk about this actually in the Big Five for Life book, that the more you're living in alignment with your Big Five for Life, the more you're fulfilling your PFE, your purpose for existing, that it is an ascending life curve. So there's still going to be ups and downs, but at some point your lows are now higher than what used to be your highs. And that's a wonderful curve to be on in a very positive sort of way.
And you led right into our next topic, which is the Big Five. And I had the privilege of having you facilitate our group and me through the Big Five process. So tell us about the Big Five.
Yeah, it's a concept, like I said, that I introduced in 2 different books. One was called Life Safari, and the other one is in the book called The Big Five for Life. And the idea is very simple. It's imagine if you were to articulate the 5 things that you most want to do, see, or experience in your lifetime before you die. The 5 things so powerful that if you were to do, see, or experience them, that in the last few moments of your life, you could look back and you say, you know what, no matter what else I did or I didn't get to, I got to those 5 things. And therefore my life is a success by my own definition of success. And then it's about aligning your resources, your emotional resources, your time resources, your financial resources, your energetic resources around these 5 things. And it's incredibly powerful and useful, John, because we are bombarded with potential distractions in life. And there's this thing called FOMO, which is not something that I personally have suffered from, but my colleagues tell me that it is one of the great challenges out there, this fear of missing out. And when you allow yourself to lock in on these 5 things, the rest of those distractions just bounce off you. And I use the analogy of a Velcro wall. Do you remember back in the day, there used to be a late night talk show host who would dress himself in a Velcro suit and he would jump off a trampoline and stick to the wall like it was a stunt. Right. And to me, this is what happens with you and your Big Five for Life and your PFE. When you're approached with a potential distraction, if it's in alignment with your Big Five for Life and PFE, then it sticks to you. Your unconscious mind, your conscious mind say, this is something worth spending some time, energy, etc. on. When it's not, it just bounces right off of you. So it really eliminates a lot of the stress. It allows you to have a very clear focus. And I think in my context, my view of the way the universe works, this is like opening up a homing beacon. And you're sending the signal, and you just find that the right people coincidentally come across your paths. You find that you notice things that you may not have noticed before. It just makes life a lot easier.
Great. And some people might think, well, I don't have 5, but which is, you say is fine. But what about somebody who goes 5? I want to do 25. So what advice do you give for folks like that?
Right. So the reason why is it 5 and not 25 or not 100? And there's two core reasons for that. One is probably 3. The first reason is because the genesis of the idea came to me while I was in Africa, and everybody talks about what's called the African Big Five. And so that was sort of the connection point to this. A second reason is because when we have a list of 25 things in front of us, our brain wants the satisfaction of completing a task. And so we are likely to do the one that is the easiest to accomplish so that we can get that dopamine fix by crossing it off. And you know that this is true if you're listening to this, if you've ever had the experience of you start off your day with a to-do list, you actually do something that was not on the to-do list. So then you write it on the to-do list and cross it off, right? Because it just makes us feel good. Like, whoa, look at me go. But the thing is you don't want to get to the end of your life and be like, well, I did the easy ones. Yeah. You want to get to the end of your life and feel like you really lived the life you were born to live. The second reason is because I find that when people look at a list of 25 or 100 things, sort of the default mechanism that also often comes up is they say, I'm going to start that tomorrow. It's overwhelming. And so 5 things is very manageable.
Yeah. And it's kind of like, I use this analogy sometimes like, well, I'm going to climb Everest. Okay. Why don't you work out on some hills first? You can walk to, but because I think, and this is what you said, if the goal is too big, we will put it aside. And we will cheat ourselves because maybe I'll never climb Everest, but I'll do something of importance along the way that is meaningful to me.
Yeah, and I can give you an awesome tool for starting the process if you'd like. So one of the things that I often get asked is, in what way can you overcome the fears of getting started or the uncertainty of getting started? And so I've got 2 specific pieces of advice to remind me because my mind sometimes gets distracted. So the second one that I will share with you is who versus how. So remind me about that one. But the first one is what I call sampling. And that is, if you've ever gone into a grocery store before COVID, and they had samples there, and if they were trying to inspire you to try a new cheese or a bread or something else, they've got them on a tray and they've got little toothpicks in them. But how big is the sample that they're offering you? You know, it's tiny, right? I mean, it's like the risk ratio is nothing to try it.
That's why I try to get 10 of them.
You go there at 11:45, you grab a little lunch snack. But and here's the reason that this works, and here's how we can apply it to our lives. If you try it and you like it, how big is the pack of cheese or bread that they have you buy? It's like considerably bigger, right? But by then you've already invested and tried it with a low risk, and so you're willing to then do the bigger thing. So the takeaway is, in life, if we allow ourselves to sample small doses, our unconscious mind starts to move past the fear threshold and into the I really would like to do that threshold. So instead of you trying to pull your brain forward to make a change, which it doesn't want to do, it instead is pushing you to make the change. And so an example of sampling would be, let's say you wanted to go sail and you wanted to sail for 6 months of the year, and this was a new concept for you. I would say to you, all right, so for the next week, John, you can spend 5 minutes a day looking at YouTube videos of people sailing. Well, your brain is going to look at that imagery and say, well, look at that guy on the boat. He's a guy. We're a guy. Like, he's not dying. Matter of fact, he's smiling. He's happy. Like, we could totally do this, right? And over time, that 5 minutes becomes 10, then 20, and eventually it's an hour. And then you start to improve the size of the sample. And before you know it, your brain is saying, let's get on a boat and sail. Right? So it's a very powerful and simple methodology that I learned by looking at people in a grocery store. You never know where you're going to find your inspiration. The second thing is who versus how. This to me is one of the single greatest pieces of life wisdom that I've learned during my entire time on the planet. And this is when you know where you're at in life and you know where you want to go, you want to fulfill your big five for life. So often the question people ask is, well, how do I get there?
Yeah.
And this is a recipe for disaster, because with every time you ask that question, how, comes a learning curve, an obstacle, and a barrier. And by the time people hit the third obstacle barrier, they give up. And I think probably almost everybody on the planet knows someone or has personally experienced that phase of giving up. But if instead you adopt the practice of who, all right, it's not how do I get there, it's who's already done, seen, or experienced what I want to do, see, or experience. And if you find out about those people, and oh, by the way, we live at an unprecedented time in history where you can get access to anybody's story through Google, through YouTube, through documentaries. So if you learn about that person and you learn what they did and the steps they took, and then you start imitating it, it's just this thing in the brain where it's like you already know it's been successful. Your brain gets on board and you have a path to walk that's already been walked. It literally will fly you over the tops of the obstacles. It is an unbelievable technique. So anytime we find ourselves asking, well, how do I do that? Switch that to, well, who's already done it?
That's a great story. And it's, you've tied a loop for me, because my greatest inspiration is for people who have done that, whether someone like you, I find very inspiring for how you've accomplished your career, how you've written all of these things, and how you've become well known. That's because of the gift that you share with us. And so it's a good story. Now, I want to ask you something, because you're a person who takes journeys, and I know you like to travel, or at least, and you will again once we all get vaccinated and whatever. Along the way, you encounter people who are wise people. It's what you write about. So how does one open oneself to these learning opportunities? It's a mindset, is it not, John?
Yeah, that's such a great question, John, because for the vast majority of my early life, I struggled to even allow myself to enter the place where that conversation could happen. And the reason is because I was very insecure. I did not come from much means. And so I think I felt a little embarrassed about the clothes I was wearing and the shoes I was wearing and the rest of that. And I just didn't have a lot of self-confidence. And the problem with that is you're afraid to look stupid. And so you don't engage in discussions that you don't know things about, because you don't want to look like you don't belong. The truth, though, is that every expert, this is one of the other major ahas I had in my life. Every expert starts off knowing nothing about what they became an expert in, whether it's Albert Einstein, whether it's John Glenn, whether it is Tiger Woods, any other major contributor to a sport, to an invention, to the sciences, to the field of business. They all started off knowing nothing about what they became an expert in. And somehow this is so freeing of a concept to me. And I think probably the biggest piece of advice I would give is allow yourself to ask the questions and don't worry about appearing stupid. If they think you're stupid for asking that question, they're probably not the kind of person you want to be hanging out with anyway. So great. You've just figured that out early on. And to the contrary, and I'll give you an example in the field of travel. So because I love to do adventure travel, when a young person comes to me and says, I hear you talk about adventure travel, I see your face light up and I would love to do that. Can you tell me about it? John, I will literally not stop talking to this person until I feel like they're ready to go and backpack around the world. And this is a huge takeaway, because whether it's talking about entrepreneurship with a great entrepreneur, whether it's talking about parenting with an amazing parent, if you love your topic, you want to talk to people and you feel grateful that you get the chance to share that wisdom and your life learnings with someone who is just starting off. You really do.
Yeah, it's wonderful. Well, not only do you write books that help people, you've developed a series of courses. Tell us about these.
Yeah, so I had released The Cafe on the Edge of the World, and then I released The Big Five for Life, and I was getting a ton of great feedback. I was also getting a lot of messages saying, I am struggling to figure out my purpose. I am struggling to figure out my Big Five for Life. Can you help me? And at the time, I didn't have any process for that. I had gone and backpacked around the world for a year, and that was one of the most eye-opening and enlightening things to me. So I'd always say to them, like, if you can, go backpack around the world for a year.
Right. Good. Yeah.
And, for some people that actually worked. I remember some great conversations, and off they went, and they sent me pictures from the road. But for other people, they said, well, yeah, that's great, but that's not what I can do right now. And so about 10 years ago, I created a process that people go through. It's a 2-day experience, or they can do it online as well, where they go through the experience of answering a lot of questions, really. I ask the questions and they answer the questions. And what happens is they move the information from their unconscious mind forward to their conscious mind. Because I firmly believe everybody already knows their Big Five for Life and their purpose. It's just that it's been covered over with so many layers of you have to do this, you can't do this, you should do this, that it's peeling back the layers of those so that the person can reconnect with what's already inside of them. And part of the reason I would say that is because some of the exercises, and these are super fun, easy exercises to go through. And I'll give you an example of one, which is, if I gave you $300 right now, where would you go spend it and why? And when the person describes it to me, I'll ask them questions like, well, just describe the space. And you'll hear things like, I love going to this place and spending it because everybody is super friendly there and the environment is really wide open and they always have new things there. And these are all clues from the unconscious mind. And you put enough of these clues together over the course of the 2 days, and every single person who has ever walked into that course with the desire to figure out their Big Five for Life has walked out knowing exactly their purpose and their Big Five for Life.
That's powerful. Well, I can attest to it because you facilitated me and others, and I know we all found the experience most enriching, and we're better. I'm better for it, and I know we're all better for it. Unfortunately, John, we are coming close to the end of our show, and I always ask every guest, do you have a story of grace that you would like to share?
Yeah. So, crazy enough, because you were kind enough. So I'm going to share a story of my own grace, or my attempt at grace. And I'm also going to throw a thank you grace moment back to you. So we had scheduled this interview a while back, and I hadn't gotten back to you on an email regarding some questions that you had asked me about. And you said, is everything okay? And it turned out that my dad wasn't doing that great. And you were so kind to say, do you want to postpone the interview? Can I be of help in any way? And I'm so grateful for that, John. That's such a compassionate act, and I really do appreciate it. Well, and I will say that I was with my dad yesterday, and he was not doing well at all. And this morning he was admitted to the hospital. And so my moment of grace today is to try and maintain my optimism in the face of adversity, because with COVID, he can't have other people in the room with him. And he absolutely hates that. He needs to have people with him. And so I'm trying to be optimistic in the face of adversity. I am trying to be grateful and find what is the, as we talked about earlier in the interview, what is the yin to this yang? What is the positive takeaway from this moment? And to maintain my state of grace and be grateful for every moment that I've had with my dad, and to look forward to the moments that I really look forward to having with him when he gets back out of the hospital.
Thank you. Thank you for the kind words. But that's such a refreshing attitude, and particularly for now, because, and we wish your father a swift recovery. But we also are, all of us are in this kind of position now, because what was comfortable for us, what was familiar to us, and all of these things has been taken away. So as you say, try to look on the bright side, not in a naive way, but in a be thankful for what you have and move forward. So.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, whether it's being grateful that this happened now instead of 30 years ago, so you can get on a video call with people that you couldn't have before. Grateful that you have unlimited access to Netflix and YouTube and a wide array of resources. If this was 1918 like the last time, how would we have kept ourselves entertained for 24/7?
It would have been quite a challenge. And yes, that video connection or the information that's out there in so many different forms is really a godsend right now. So it is something, a bright side. John, how can people find you?
Yeah, I'm available on all social media platforms like Instagram and Facebook. And if our conversation has inspired you in some way, and I sure hope that it has, I regularly post thoughts and ideas and inspiring content that comes into my head. And so please do follow us on Instagram and Facebook and the rest of that. Twitter as well. And you can certainly connect with us on my website, which is johnstrelecky.com. And there's some articles there that I've written that are available just as a courtesy to Cafe fans.
Great. John, we will put your website in the notes so everybody can have it. Thanks, John. You are a man of grace. You have inspired me, and it has been an honor to have you on the show today. Thank you.
Thanks, John. I have one more thing that I'm going to offer to your audience, because so first of all, this is a great book and you should read it. And people were asking me, what is a gift of gratitude for the holiday season that's approaching? And they asked me as an author. And I will say to you, for everybody who's listening, if you love a book, mine, John's, anybody else's, whether it's action, thriller, mystery, whatever, take a moment and write a positive review for them on Amazon. Because as authors in this time, we don't get a chance to interact with the fans. Yes. And so taking the time to post that review, I kid you not, it is one of the things that really inspires all of us who write books. And I know that your favorite author, again, mystery, action, whatever, would really appreciate it if you took the time to do that.
It's a simple thing to do, and thanks, John, for that. Thanks for the kind words about my book, Grace, and I feel the same about your work. So, John, it's been a pleasure to have you. I'm going to close out.
Take care.